days have passed since Trump has threatened or has said that basically unless all hostages are released by Saturday noon, that all hell will break loose, whatever that means. Uh, Now, basically, there was also on Tuesday, Israel also had, or Netanyahu had a meeting with his cabinet, and they basically decided to basically they do go along with this idea, although they did not have specified that it's gonna be all the hostages. So that's a bit different. Now, Marco Rubio has doubled down on Trump's statement, basically saying, yes, unless all hostages are released, there will be a problem. Now, the next few days are going to be interesting because neither side seems to be backing down, neither Israel nor Hamas. Hamas has basically said, we will not, these are just threats, we will not go by. We still are behind the idea that Israel has violated the terms of the ceasefire. And as I've said, Netanyahu has said, unless hostages are released, or at least we go back to the schedule that was supposed to happen, there will no longer be a ceasefire. I should also mention Marco Rubio also said that, yeah, basically he will support breaking the ceasefire if it does happen. So this is gonna be very interesting next few days. It's gonna change a lot, and I think there's a few more things to talk about. But I think after this episode, it's gonna be hard to keep talking about this same thing because the big part of it is just waiting until what happens on Saturday if either side backs down, and we can also discuss today what might happen because whatever you think of Hamas, I don't think their goal is their own destruction. So, sort of to understand what's really going on is, I think, also interesting. But joining me today is James Valliant. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And James, what do you make of? I guess first start with sort of Hamas claiming that Israel is breaking the ceasefire, and then Trump's threat or promise.
The deal in the first place, to put it, put no fine point on it. The deal initially, of course, sucked, and we denounced it for what it was. And yeah, I mean, it had been worked out under the previous administration, Biden, who'd been putting all kinds of pressure on Israel, terrible pressure on Israel. But we all said that Hamas wasn't going to abide by the terms of the agreement. We all predicted, and I think it was a pretty safe prediction that Hamas was not going to give us the names, and some of these people would be dead, and they're not going to keep to the letter of the agreement. That was kind of a no-brainer. I think the generous way of looking at the new administration, Trump, is that although he wanted to take credit for the hostages being released who have been released recently, and he didn't want to interfere with a deal that could do that, he had initially said basically all hostages or hell will break loose. And now he's returned to that position in light of Hamas's violation. More than that, I think it was the condition of the last hostages who were released. They looked like they'd been starved to death, frankly. When I first saw them, I thought they looked like they'd been starved, maybe even beaten. And I heard a report, I don't know if it's true, that they were force feeding them before they were released. If that's the condition, then that certainly changes in some ways the position. But I think Trump is returning to the position he wanted all along, which is the or else. Now, what does that or else mean is another matter, probably to let Israel go and uh, continue to wipe out Hamas or try to wipe out Hamas in Gaza. Um, you indicated that the Israeli government isn't clear about the all hostages being released by noon on Saturday, but Trump and the Secretary of State, Rubio, have been quite clear, as you indicated, all hostages. And, but what happens if they release, the next scheduled, what is it, eight
It's
hostages?
supposed to be much more than, or sort of much bigger number than it was before.
Yeah. And well, there are what, 76 remaining hostages, about half of whom they say are dead or confirmed dead.
Confirm that.
Then what if they're not all alive? What if they are in really bad condition? What if they can't deliver the hostages because they don't know where they are? Then Hamas is in a corner that they can't get out of, right? They were in that corner anyway when they made the deal. The deal sucked. You should never deal with Hamas. I can all like the way the generous way of looking at it is that Trump wanted to see if they would release at least some, and some have been released. But now looking at the condition of the most recent hostages released, I think it's now all of them now. We're not going to wait. You have one chance to release all of the hostages. So the next 3 days will be interesting in my view. Like I said, like we all said, the deal sucked in the first place. But it's good that Trump has at least reverted to his rhetorically strong stance of all hell will break loose if all of the hostages are not released by X date. I think that's where Trump's heart was anyway. I'm hoping that that really does mean that hell will be paid. But that probably just means that all the previous limitations from the Biden administration are lifted. Israel will have a free hand to do what it wants to do, needs to do in Gaza.
We have a super chat from Bulmus. Thank you so much. He says, with some of the hostages and a significant number of murdered are also Americans, Trump has just as much reason as Israel to hunt down Hamas. Yeah, I believe there are. I think I'm not sure if there's only one American left in Gaza or if there are a few more, because I think one of them was released during this part. But yeah, there are still Americans. There have been. Yeah, that's why at all times I said America absolutely has sort of reason to be here. It's American citizens, you know, there. Americans are hostages, and America should do whatever is necessary to bring them back. Now, again, we are talking about a terrorist organization. You could make a different scenario if, let's say, America says, "Hey guys, don't go to this country because we cannot bring you back. We have no if something happens there, we just have no relations with that country." And if there it's something like that. But with this, I think there was a terrorist organization that came in and took Americans hostages, Americans who either were on a vacation when it comes to sort of being at the Nova Festival, or were simply in there and were taken from either the festival or taken from their homes, taken by a terrorist organization into the homes of Palestinians, regular Palestinians. America absolutely has not. I never like to say America has a right to defend itself, or Israel has a right to defend itself, or Israel or America has like a right to do something. It has a responsibility. It's not.
Yeah,
It has
no,
to do. It's not like a choice you can do. Like, oh, if America wants, it can save its own citizens. No, America has to do it.
with Americans in Israel being taken hostage since October of 2023, Biden's shameful policy of not being involved himself in the attack on Hamas and the destruction of Hamas is shameful, just absolutely shameful. Yeah, but President Biden, since October of 2023, and for more than a year thereafter, had a moral responsibility as President of the United States to defend Americans there. Frankly, though, if there hadn't been Americans taken, Israel is an ally. Israel is under assault from the savage forces that are pitted against civilization itself, these horrific mystics who want nothing more than to cause Jewish suffering and Jewish death. Now, I think America should take the side of Israel, even if Americans hadn't been taken. The fact that Americans had been taken shows what complete dereliction of responsibility, the complete lack of response on Biden's part was shameful and immoral. More than the right to defend yourself, Biden had a responsibility to take active, kinetic steps in doing this. And well, we have recently, of course, the Houthis saying, well, we're still in there with, solidarity with Hamas and Hezbollah. That is certainly a place where Trump should go after, as well as actively assisting in Israel's assault on Hamas. Americans had been taken. Let's assume that the remaining Americans are released by Saturday. It would not change the calculation, in my view, and that's why I'm glad that Trump has said all hostages, whatever their nationality or joint nationalities happen to be, this was an attack on civilization. This was an attack on American interests by American enemies, by people who are funded by Iran, who've been killing Americans and Israelis for decades now. So, and all of Hezbollah's affiliates that have been killing Americans and Israelis for decades now. So it doesn't change the calculation in my mind, but it shows the moral dereliction of responsibility on the part of President Biden, who didn't do a goddamn thing to help. All he did was try and hamper and hinder Israel's response. It was utterly disgusting how Joe Biden betrayed Americans on every day that followed from October 7th, 2023, until he left office. Joe Biden's response was despicable. Now, will Trump's response be any better? Well, at least rhetorically it is, and we'll see what that hell is to be paid on Saturday. I think it'll be mostly just letting Israel do what Netanyahu probably just wants to do. So I'm glad that Israel has said, yeah, we're with this, but their failure to say all hostages is interesting. What if only the scheduled number of hostages are released and Hamas goes back to the deal that they say Israel has violated? Well, Hamas has violated it. I think the deal sucked. I don't think the deal is reliable. I don't think we could have I don't think we should in any way have any hopes that Hamas was ever going to live up to that deal. It will. The next 3 days will indeed be very, very interesting, won't they? Will Hamas try to respond with hostages? The scheduled number of hostages? Will they release all the hostages? Because that might create an in-between situation, and I hope that we don't lose our moral clarity on the matter if something in between happens and Hamas releases some hostages rather than all of the hostages that the president has said must be released.
Yeah, so something, well, first of all, something that sort of always bugged me about Trump, and sort of here it's shown again, is, back a week ago or so when Trump revealed his plan for Gaza, it looked like Netanyahu didn't know about it, and it looked like nobody knew about what Trump's gonna happen. And that is sort of always, I think, a big problem when you have someone who doesn't communicate what it's gonna do. And as an investor, it's like real bad for the markets when like shit suddenly starts changing. But even when it comes to this, when I think I'm getting a lot of mixed signals when I'm like watching sort of what Trump is doing and what Netanyahu is doing, because so when before Trump's inauguration, we had, of course, the fact that Witkoff forced or sort of really tried to force Netanyahu into basically taking a deal. Now, some people were saying, well, maybe we just get a few hostages back and then Trump sort of breaks it, or because Hamas will break it, we'll just go back on the deal, we'll go back. Now, something that has been happening from Netanyahu's side is he pulled out of Rafah crossing, he pulled out of Netzarim corridor, which is part of a deal. Now, the idea of now going back is going to be really complicated. And so I'm really thinking like, if the idea was to go back, then what's happening here? Like, why are we pulling out when we plan to go back in, making it complicated? Is it really just Trump sort of doing whatever and seeing how it's gonna go? Does he communicate anything with Netanyahu? That's my sort of like really complicated part, that it's like we have no sort of agreement on what we are actually sort of doing. I mean, James, what do you make of that?
Words do not have much meaning to Mr. Trump. They're negotiating tools, and that's what they are to him. And he'll say something, and you're not know. I once had a friend who was trying to explain. We both disagreed with the Vietnam War, and my friend was trying to say, well, if I'm trying to pull out a justification for that despicable, unnecessary war in which so many thousands of Americans died unnecessarily, to show the communist world that we're so crazy, we'll do anything. That's the kind of tactic that Trump, I think, is using to show that maybe I'm so unpredictable, so crazy. Some of the things I say may sound outrageous on the face of it and not be clear and not be specific in what I mean. What he's trying to do is throw them off balance so they don't know where he's coming from. So it makes it impossible for us to predict. And that's the kind of the situation we're in with an anti-conceptual mentality like Mr. Trump. You can't really use his words as much more than a vague indicator of where he might go. Certainly doesn't have the moral clarity that I would like on this, but he compared to, but if I'm going to do a comparison, it's the or all hell will break loose sort of thing. All hostages must be released. That at least has some moral clarity and some exactness, so that if Trump doesn't do something by Saturday, after Saturday at noon, if there isn't serious kinetic action, if there isn't serious punishment held to be paid from someone on Hamas in Gaza, then Trump will have really violated his word, and that will take his credibility, even his, I'll just say crazy, scary stuff to get people off balance and not know what I'm doing. That will diminish the power of that vagueness. But his vagueness is despicable in itself. If you want an Israeli occupation, say Israel should occupy the place. Now, you bring up a very good point, though. The Rafah crossing. What the hell were they doing? Obviously, they thought that the terms required them to remove themselves from those areas to get those hostages back at least. But
Now,
now
I'll
back
jump in
in.
on that. The Netzarim corridor specifically, which is the part in the middle of Gaza, basically that separates north and south, that Israel established quickly or soon after October 7 to stop sort of people just going about from north to south. I think that was part of a deal because the Palestinians were supposed to sort of return to their homes. So I think that's something that is acceptable. When it comes to Rafah crossing, not only, I'm still not sure if Israel officially recognizes that they are not there, because the big problem with it was when they pulled out, they didn't say officially that they pulled out. Um,
But that sounds
yeah.
insane to me. How can you do anything and withdraw yourself from the border between Egypt and Gaza? I mean, that is utterly insane. And as you point out, having to go back to areas you've pulled out from, what does that look like? I mean, you're not keeping the deal. You're going to kill the remaining hostages. I can just hear it now from the whining Western media, for example. What are you doing going back into there? You're just killing the hostages unnecessarily. We had a deal. I mean, that's what scares me about sort of like a in between thing that Hamas might do, like release a few hostages or the scheduled hostages and still want to dribble them out. Would that give Israel sort of the confidence in itself, because it should ignore international opinion? But insofar as Trump is now sort of backing aggressive action if all the hostages aren't released on Saturday at noon, the question is, will Israel have within itself the moral authority to go back into these crucial areas that are so vital to Israeli security at this point, demonstrated to be of vital importance to Israeli security at this point? Um, I don't know. So, it was, I must say that I think it was Trump's threat before that motivated Hamas to even make the deal in the first place. And so perhaps Trump's threat here, we will at least learn whether or not Hamas took that seriously, takes that seriously, cares, or can even deliver on the promise of releasing the hostages that we believe are still alive.
We have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. A super chat from Jonathan. Thank you. And a super chat from Jason. Thank you so much. I mean, there is a question about, we've seen the state of the hostages that were released last Saturday, and sort of the question, we still, and I sort of dislike always sort of pulling out just few specific sort of hostages, but the Bebas boys, the two children that are still in Gaza, and not to sort of discount all the other hostages, of course, that are still kept, but yeah, I mean, where are they? Where are the hostages? So IDF has confirmed that about or a little bit less than half of the hostages are confirmed dead. Now, Hamas themselves have confirmed that 8 of the hostages that are supposed to be released during this first phase, this first 42 days, are dead. Now, as part of this deal, which was supposed to happen in phase two, was that also the bodies of the hostages and the soldiers are also going to be returned as part of a deal. Now, assuming or sort of let's say all the hostages are actually dead and sort of or are even in a worse state than the last hostages that were released. Now the question is, what could happen? Basically, Hamas could decide to continue and release the bodies, release the hostages in really bad state. Uh, and then the ball would be again in Israeli court, basically saying, wow, so either all hostages are dead, what are we going to do? Or are we going to continue with this deal? Since it was already part of it was that, yes, we are also simply just getting the bodies back in some cases.
What a
That's going to be a
despicable
quick.
moral thought. What a despicable moral thought that is. That, the deal goes through when they deliver dead bodies. I mean, why the hell were we engaged in a deal for dead bodies? I mean, I suspected that many of these people, look, more than a year ago, I suspected that many of them were dead and weren't going to be found. I mean, where are all these hostages? Does the Islamic Brotherhood have some? Do ordinary Palestinians have some? Where are they? What condition are they in? Can they deliver on the promise? And if it is just dead bodies, will that be enough to get Israel to say, well, okay, we'll just keep going with the deal and not hammer you, going back to just hammering you like we should be doing over some dead bodies? That's despicable. That's really despicable. It's part of what made the whole deal so rotten in the first place. We don't know. We don't know whether they can deliver on the promise. We don't know how these hostages have been treated, or how many are, like you say, Israel's confirmed that, about half are dead. And so we have good reason to believe that half are dead. What about the others? And they're still making a deal when half are dead? I mean, no. I mean, all I can do is keep my fingers crossed that all hell does break loose. Uh, uh, Whether it's because Hamas can't deliver or won't deliver doesn't matter to me. It truly is irrelevant. Their intentions, their motivations are utterly irrelevant at this point and shouldn't cause us to change, the West to change its stance on Hamas, which must be utterly destroyed for what it's done. Um,
One in the chat is saying, didn't Hamas break the deal when they didn't release the Bibas family in the first group? There was supposed to be women and children. I'm not sure if they were supposed to be in the first, but definitely in these sort of first groups that are being released, it's supposed to be women, children, and elderly. And I mean, Hamas has broke the deal in like many different ways.
right.
It's not something to really. I mean, it's something you would expect, something that happened even during the first ceasefire deal. It's only that Israel has decided that it's worth to go through even a few breaks of a ceasefire to get the hostages back. And that's the same thing that's happening today. Basically, Israel is saying, yes, they are breaking the deal, but it's worth it to get some of the hostages back or to get even some other hostages back, even if it means the deal is not being fulfilled as it should have been. So now that's going to be
Well,
the
that's
big
the
question on Saturday, if this is gonna be like an actual game breaking or sort of like deal breaking
exactly.
scenario, or if Israel will again accept something different.
Exactly. I mean, everybody, it's funny things like everybody just assumes that Hamas will break the terms of the deal, but we're doing our best to get the hostages back. Okay. Now that's not a proper motive. But you see, that's the politics, the political situation the Israeli government finds itself in. So the question is, will Hamas do enough to satisfy the, the political forces that encouraged Netanyahu to do this in the first place? Will Hamas, that's really what it comes down to. And Please, Mr. Netanyahu, if every single hostage isn't released by noon on Saturday, we know what the intentions of Hamas are. We don't even know if they can deliver on this promise. So no, please let all hell break loose again. And for God's sakes, cut off the Rafah crossing. For God's sakes, get back the corridor that cuts Gaza in half, at least at a bare minimum. All hell should break loose on Saturday. In any case, in my mind, because they're not a good faith. Hamas is not a good faith negotiating partner. But this gives the international, our glorious leaders, a good excuse, at least to have an excuse for doing so. And insofar as that's the case, it's a better situation. It's a better situation than continuing on letting these hostages come out in dribs and drabs, or bodies come out in dribs and drabs over the next several months as they negotiate various other things. But yeah, everyone knows Hamas is going to break the deal. Everyone knew from the outset that Hamas was going to break whatever deal was made. They're not good faith negotiating partners. Full stop. You can't trust the people who perpetrated October 7th. Newsflash. Big surprise there, right?
Someone has a good question. It's asking, is it known Israel time, UK time, or USA DC time? Now, I don't think Trump has specified. I would assume it's Israeli time, because in DC time it would be no, it would be even later. It would be 7 p.m. Israeli time, which usually the exchanges happen much earlier. So I would assume it's Israeli time. That
That's
would
an
be
interesting
like
question. Yeah, I mean,
that would
noon,
be like early morning for Americans, and
but I don't think it'll
sort of.
matter. I don't think that noon Israel time, or noon U.S. time, or noon Greenwich time is going to much matter. I don't
Yeah,
think
they're
that.
supposed to release. Hamas is supposed
Yeah,
to release. Who are they releasing even before? As well as, of course, you have to organize it. You have to organize with the Red Cross, basically where the release is even happening, because sometimes it's Islamic Jihad, sometimes it's Hamas, and it's in different cities at all times. I think even by Friday we might know what's gonna happen. I would be surprised if it's like Friday, like evening, and we still have no idea what's gonna happen. I think if we don't know what's gonna happen, it pretty much means Hamas is not releasing them. So yeah, we
whether
will
they
most
can
likely.
or whether they won't or what, they should. We should get some indication beforehand, and surely by Saturday itself, we'll have some indication of whether there's going to be any release. Surely, I mean, there's just no way you can logistically do it, right?
So yeah, that's about it. We'll continue following it, and of course, jump in if anything breakthrough happens when it comes to either side backs down, or someone else steps in, or something evolves. In the meantime, we have the reality show coming up where we'll be talking about MAGA's anti-Semitism problem and how to fix it, specifically certain parts of the, let's say, the more conspiracy-minded parts of MAGA movement, or sort of MAGA supporters. Many of them we have
Despicable
discussed.
rise of anti-Semitism in the American political right. The despicable rise of anti-Semitism in the American right. It's disgusting. Please tune in. I mean, it's one of the horrific stories here.
Yeah,
And
many of them we have discussed in the past, so it's not going to be anything new in some ways, but sort of it's going to all going to be in one place. And as well, many of these people either do have a direct contact with either directly Donald Trump, or Donald Trump Jr., or different parts of Donald Trump's administration. So I think it's important to talk about it, and also because they might have some actual influence, and I think might affect Trump's policy, even if it's very sudden. But let's hope not. But it's still good to discuss it. So thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll be back on the reality show in just about a minute or so. Thank you, and bye bye.
be safe.